Hello, internet friends, and welcome to the Battle for Azeroth first pass during the beta testing phase for the Affliction Warlock. My name is Bay, and I just got done doing just shy 3 hours of looking at this with chat room, and this is going to be a much shorter video, I think. First off, the amount of things and stuff and hooks and bits and bobs that the Affliction Warlock has not lost, because again, every single spec loses things when their artifact goes away. But Affliction is a weird one because, well, first off, full disclosure, we still have a coming soon talent, right? But it also, there's a lot of just core pieces that you may be really used to as Affliction that aren't here anymore. And the spec still works. It still has some options and still has like 2 different builds, very AoE focused, very multi-dot, maybe 2-target cleave focused, and a very single target. I don't know how to min-max this build, because I'm a fledgling warlock. I don't know what I'm doing. But overall, let me go over some core things that have been changed here that we'll then talk about as we go through. If you want to watch the entire testing process video, that will be uploaded as well right here on the channel in the Twitch VOD version. Otherwise, this is the more condensed, breaking everything down, wrapping it all up for you, what we found out in the testing phase we've gone through. So again, warlock-centric things, Dark Pact. The talent uses your HP and has a less of a shield, does not use your pet's HP. Soul Conduit was nerfed to 15% from 20 on live. Soul Leech's passive healing is 8% from 10. The Absorb is also 10% down from 15, unless you take the Demon Skin talent, which I have currently in this testing. It doesn't really matter too much, though. The Grimoire talent tier was changed for all Warlocks. Shadow Fury is baseline for all Warlocks. The stun duration is now 3 seconds from 4. Cast range is 35 yards up from 30, and the cooldown increased to from 30 seconds to a minute unless you take a talent. And then your Demonic Circle has both freaking buttons back, in case you haven't seen that from the other Warlock videos. So that, of course, still a talent, but you have both of your buttons back, if that is a big problem or not for you. Other things, so Reap Souls and all of the Rend Soul stuff, all gone. Drain Soul, also all gone. Replaced with Shadow Bolt. So that is your main filler now, is Shadow Bolt. And there are some synergies with Shadow Bolt, but overall, currently, it's just kind of there. We do have all of the life tap and empowered life tap stuff also removed. And Infernal and Doomguard cooldowns are gone. So you have no baseline cooldown. Again, anything you see in these videos when we start off here that are highlighted are talents that we'll go over later. But there is no cooldown baseline for Affliction, which is weird. Which, again, may change. They just literally changed Implosion and Imp Swarm for Demonology this build, and this is an early look, so it could change in the future, but there is no baseline cooldown for Affliction, which we'll see later on how that plays out. But there's no baseline cooldown for Affliction at all. It's just, it doesn't exist. And the biggest change, and what that may not be a cooldown, is that the Legion talent you currently can play with, called Contagion, is now built in to Unstable Affliction baseline. So your UA has a 10% increased damage to targets affected by your UA. So affected targets, UA also gets the own benefit from itself, kind of like Resto Druid Mastery benefiting from its own one hot. UA baseline deals its tooltip damage, which also has your mastery involved in that, which is just going to be Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Unstable Affliction damage amp. Siphon Life, obviously, if only you take it. But the 10% flat damage applies to 1 UA. It only applies if there is 1 UA, not multiple. It's just the flat Contagion buff. But Contagion on live right now is 15%. The current Contagion you can see here is 10%. The damage amp in this regard, however, does not amplify any of your pets' damage, as it only affects the Warlocks. And the recent build removed the very shadowy Shadow Bolt and replaced it back to the goofy floating skull. We'll see in a moment. Also, as you see here, I am standing here with an imp, which you might be thinking if you're a current Affliction Warlock player, the heck are you doing? Every pet for Destruction and Affliction are the same damage. They just have different utility. So obviously with your current, what have Imp right now, you have the Imp stuff like Singe Magic, Flee, as its Firebolt attack, but you have Blood Pact because they're bringing back the raid buffs, like the group-based buffs. So you have the stamina bonus for your Imp. And if you have the Fell Hunter out, which is what you normally use as Affliction right now, the Fell Hunter does not gain any damage bonus from Shadow Bite if you have other dots on the target. The Specialization tab still shows that it does, but that is gone. So, rejoice or not, as a Warlock, you can use your Succubus, your Fell Hunter, or your Imp for their utility, not being forced to only take the Fell Hunter. That is a big, big change for Affliction, and of course, as we go to Destruction next, for Destruction as well, you don't have to use the Imp. If you want to mez or slow things or interrupt or dispel things, you can without needing to be forced into the DPS variant pet. Obviously, for Demonology, as we've already went over, you can go check out the Demonology video. The Felguard is probably still the set and forget for Demonology, but it's not as bad if they take another pet because, of course, their new mastery, when it gets reworked, will probably affect it just fine. But for the other two specs, for these two in particular, that's a pretty big deal. We'll head down here real quick. Anything else? The Agony Shard system. The removal of Ulthalesh, the Deadwind Harvester, your artifact, is going to change how soul stuff work. Obviously, there is no other little soul fragment or tormented soul that you have to figure out or deal with at all. It's just going to be the regular soul shard mechanic, which is just what you are doing with normally, but it's really slow-ish because it's only going to be affected with Agony. So when you put Agony up, you'll get soul shards over time. And the way this works is we dug this back up. The quote from Legion is that Agony still has a rising proc chance for each passing tick that doesn't give a shard. Currently, it is 2.5% per tick, increasing by 2.5% for each tick that goes by without a proc. And once it does proc, it will reset. So yes, multi-agoning does result in more soul shards, as any Affliction Warlock would know. But once you get a soul shard, it will reset back to the base value. And that's just how it works. I don't think this has been changed so far yet. There isn't a theory crafting thread yet for Battle for Azeroth anywhere. It's just, this is the Legion information. So multi-agonying will result in more shards, which you then spend on UAs. But because of the new UA change, ignore the animation glitch on my Nightborn here. Because of the UA change, you don't want to do a whole lot of UAs like this unless you're bursting, because Contagion, again, is baseline. Most likely what you're looking at doing with UAs is rotating them in to always be within the UA Contagion window and always keep that extra 10% damage active and not lose out on it. Obviously, stacking UAs to not go over Soul Shard cap, depending on how many, targets you have with your unstable, with your agonies, right? This can obviously be a thing. But on a single target fight, you're probably going to want to just stay inside that window. Just based on what we've been finding out today, throwing up a whole ton of UAs will obviously do damage in a short window of time, but if you don't have any soul shards, you lose out on the Contagion window. So more on that, of course, as much better Warlocks than I figure all of that out. But baseline, you're looking at it. You're looking at the baseline spells and the baseline rotation. This is it. This is all you have for Affliction now. There's nothing really else behind the scenes that you have to work on, which may be incredibly boring or not to you, depending on how you like playing with your dots. But obviously, you're gonna need to put your talents in here to really add anything else to it. Other than that, nothing else has really changed. Let me double check my notes here. Everything else is about talents and things. I suppose the one thing you may have seen right off the bat in the talent window in this current build is that your level 30 tier has some pretty interesting competing talents. So over on the current live build, I'm looking over here at the talent calculator, Death's Embrace is a 100, Writhe and Agony is a 15, and Absolute Corruption is a 30. As you see, they are all in the same tier now, which is very rotational or fight dependent, whereas you can't just have all of them. Death's Embrace being your up to 40% increased damage to targets below 35% health, your execute, as it were. Absolute Corruption being a increase in the baseline amount of damage that corruption deals and making it permanent. And Writhe and Agony making your stacks of Agony go to 15. Baseline is 10. This, and coupled with the 15 tier, which we'll go through in a moment, are a lot of how the Affliction Warlock will play, how it will work out, what it does, and how it does what it does. Because if you have a fight where you can get a lot of bonus damage out of a execute window, like say Mythic Argus or Mythic Agrimar, where you're in that window of time for 2 or so minutes, then obviously Death's Embrace might be a duh. Absolute Corruption obviously has a huge benefit to AoEing mobs that are going to be alive a long time, high Mythic plus keys, and Writhe and Agony has the most benefit, most likely, with just a sort of standard single target-ish or council-style fight. Now, what determines picking these talents and how the playstyle works goes a lot involved with your 15 tier. Deathbolt is brand new, so let's go over Deathbolt first a little bit here and what we found out with Deathbolt. I have Siphon Life also talented here, which is still a 100 talent tier, so we'll still work with that, because what Deathbolt does is a 25-second cooldown, 2-second cast before haste, launches a bolt of death at the target. This does chaos damage. I have in my report that it should say it does chaos damage, if that might be placeholder or not, but that means Affliction Warlocks have chaos damage. It deals 35% of the total remaining damage of your dots on the affected target. It does 0 damage if there are no dots on the target. Quite literally, it does 1. Because it has to land for at least 1 damage. 1 damage. You have to have dots on the target, and bringing up Deathbolt first in this little discussion is really impactful, I think, because it's the most skill-oriented window of time in the VOD, which you can watch later if you'd like. While we were testing Deathbolt, there are lots of when do you refresh what, how many UAs do you put on the target at one time, when do you refresh your dots, because it looks at the remaining total damage, 35% of it, and that is the damage that is snapshotted into a Deathbolt. So the way that we tested this, and there is no weird travel time shenanigans, and I'll show this off, of course, right here for you, is we looked at corruption, right? So we put a corruption on the target, and as this ticks down, when it goes to 5 seconds, I will cast a Deathbolt, and you'll see how much damage that Deathbolt will cause to the target. So at 5 seconds, there it goes, whee! So it did 284 chaos damage. That's it. Because it looked at the remaining amount of damage in the last tick plus the haste version, which I only have 15% haste on this copy character. And that's the damage that it was going to do. It probably tacked this tick plus that and this 17. 35% of that is 282. Basically. When you cast the spell, when it looses from your hand, that's what it looks like. But now, if I do the test people were wondering about snapshotting, now if I cast a Corruption, cast a Deathbolt, and then at 5 seconds, again, to prove this, I will recast Corruption at 5, right before I launch it, to show you that it refreshes before it hits, still 282. So it is a snapshot, and in effect, that it looks at your target, finds the damage that's remaining, and when your bolt lands, your Deathbolt lands, that is the damage it does. So the builds we were looking at here, Writhe and Agony beats Absolute Corruption currently as Deathbolt's tooltip will change, that it counts 16 seconds of absolute corruptions damage. This is weaker than a 15-stack Writhe and Agony on a pure single-target look. Phantom Singularity, which has been rejigged slightly, just the 5% more healing done. Phantom Singularity, I'm reporting it, doesn't count as a dot, even though it is a dot on the target, but this does not count for Deathbolt. So the only other thing you have to work with here is a larger Agony and a Siphon Life. Because that gives you the most dot potential, right? You got that, you got that, and you got this, and you got this. You have your 4 dots on the target, your 4 core damage over time effects on the target. So now, if you let your Agony get to 15 stacks, just to show you what a 15-stack Agony does for the Deathbolt. This is the newest ability, so this is most like little talking points here. I am going to assume also that, so there's 2,242 damage with 1 dot. That's with a 15-stack Writhe and Agony. It'll do like 17 or 1,600 chaos damage with just an absolute corruption on the target. The Deathbolt animation, I'm pretty sure, is placeholder. It's part of Demon Bolt and then like a little green blob. Again, you're back to this Shadow Bolt again. So we'll have to wait and see what kind of animations they're still working on. But because I thought the new Shadow Bolt looked amazing. But now, this is the weird part that I don't know. And any Warlocks in the comments can try to figure this out. And of course, as we go deeper into the testing phase, we'll see how Deathbolt works. But I hearken Deathbolt to sort of a almost Arcane Mage style builder spender window, or like the burn conserve style, where you want to stay in the contagion window all the time for all your other dot uptime. But the Deathbolt window kind of has a bit of like every dot on. But how many UAs do you cast? And do you cast 3 UAs, then refresh your Agony, and then cast a Deathbolt? Which that crit for 11,000. Or how many UAs do you cast? Is there a breakpoint where casting 2 UAs is the same as casting 3 because your third one will barely fall off by then and not really contribute any damage to the modifier of how Deathbolt works? All this stuff was a huge part of the conversation on how Deathbolt will work and interact, and it's easily the most interesting change to Affliction. And how that'll work with Death's Embrace is Death's Embrace on lower health mobs with the damage amp on your dots better than Writhe and Agony forever. So there's all this little minutia to figure out, and a lot of it is just tuning. But overall, it is the highest skill cap part of this outside of, I would say, a bit of nonsense in Shadow Embrace. Shadow Embrace, as again, and I'm doing all these sort of big chunks of talents. I don't have to go over your 45s or your 75s, right? Those are utility. Demonic Circle, Mortal Coil, Dark Fury is just 15 seconds off the Shadow Fury cooldown of a minute. You know what Burning Rush is. Dark Pact, as I said, is your health, and Demon Skin is just your passive and your more Soul Leech window. But Affliction can't go like talent by talent here because Shadow Embrace is... When we talk about this in chat, there is a very real, interesting point that people were talking about how Shadow Embrace reminded them a lot of Wrath Kata Affliction. 2-target kind of like pseudo havoc-y. So Shadow Bolt applies a Shadow Embrace 1 stack to the target, increasing your damage dealt to the target by 3% for the next 10 seconds. Stacks 3 times. If you do not hit it with a Shadow Bolt, the whole stack falls off. The whole stack will fall off. I also talented Nightfall real quick here, which is corruption damage is a chance to cause your next Shadow Bolt to be instant and deal 25% increased damage. And it timed out. This is not a rest area, so I can't just change my talents down here. It's really weird. Creeping Death, a new 100, because you know what Soul Conduit does? It's just a 15% chance. Creeping Death, though, is just Jagged Wounds from Feral Druids given to Affliction. So Agony, Corruption, and Disable Affliction deal their full damage 15% faster. So you know the way that haste works with dots now, it doesn't make them tick faster. It just essentially adds more ticks within the window. Like after you get enough haste, you pull the accordion of the dot and there's like another tick behind there. Like you saw that extra little damage at the end of that corruption before, where like each tick was the same, but the amount of haste you had added a little bit extra at the end, but enough haste will add a full other tick to the end. All Creeping Death does now is it compresses that time and make the dot 15% faster. So everything ticks quicker. Nightfall apparently is RPPM. 3 a minute, but the faster your corruption ticks, the faster you can actually get those procs to keep up Shadowy Embrace. So the example we were talking about with Absolute Corruption as well to save you globals is that with some preparation, there is a possibility to most likely do 2 target cleave. I doubt you can do more than 2 because you can get 2 targets and you can have 2 targets with Shadowy Embrace up, right? You have a 3 stack and a 3 stack. And then you can keep your agony up. Between the 2 targets, your corruption will last forever, of course. And whenever you get Nightfall procs, it opens you up to then, you know, get a UA in there, get a UA in there. And you can stay in the UA window and stay in the almost haste, yeah. And stay in the Shadowy Embrace window on 2 targets almost all the time. But this is obviously a skill set that I am not going to be that good at because I'm not a Warlock player. But this could be... haste! Yeah, see? There's definitely going to be a haste breakpoint window and an RNG window with Nightfall to make a build like this work with 2 targets. But that could be a thing. That could be how Shadowy Embrace works. Otherwise, Shadowy Embrace is just 9% more damage on your target because it's super easy. You're going to rotate in your Shadow Bolts in your rotation regardless. There's Shadowy Embrace. Your other option here is the reworked for the 1900th time Haunt. And we're going to go back to either Creeping Death or Siphon Life could work in this regard. And Absolute Corruption, Writhen Agony, or Death's Embrace all benefit in this case too. It just depends on the encounter type. We'll just take Writhe for now. Haunt deals damage on cast. It is still a direct damage dot. Let me get these corruptions off here. Haunt is a 10-second cooldown, but a 12-second debuff. This is quite different from Live, where Haunt is a 25-second cooldown and a 10-second debuff. It's 15% damage on Live. It's 10% damage here on the current Alpha build. But this means that Haunt has a 100% uptime. And because it's a rotational ability, you just hit it on cooldown to stay within both a Haunt and a Contagion UA window. So this possibility of the rotation, if you like this sort of management, is a thing. Obviously, it's not affected by haste to reduce the actual cooldown of the spell, but the cast time will be faster, of course. So this brings in a rotational dot swap, and obviously I'm still running Creeping Death right now, so it's harder to stay in the UA window because UA ticks that much faster. But that, of course, does more damage within the extra 10% modifier you have right here in Haunt. So this could be interesting and fun. Maybe. But obviously, Haunt is super single target or like priority damage, right? Like Spine of Deathwing, the plate lifts up and there's the tendon. Get in there, right? You would dot into a Haunt with Creeping Death. You have a very short window of time to attack it. And of course, if the target dies, Haunt will instantly reset to you to target back to whatever you need to go to. Modules on Mythic Argus or Argus in general, stuff like that. So this tier of abilities, 15, 30, and in a way 100, especially with like Siphon Life, Creeping Death, because of how Haunt works or how Deathbolt works, these determine like the entire playstyle of how you deal with just your dot management and procs with Affliction, which is still very much there. There's none of those soul fragmenty, you know, less soul, what are they called? I gotta read the damn tooltip now. The tormented souls you have with Reap Soul and that kind of stuff. on live currently, that is what it's been replaced with. And that is sort of up to math most of the time, right? If you're a heroic into a mythic raider, normally math determines what talents you play because X and Y and Z does more damage than A, B, and C. But if you're not that player, there is a very real, like, 3 different styles of play here with, again, this, like, Burning Conserve, UA, Deathbolt, Snapshotty window, the rotational upkeep of Haunt, and then Shadowy Embrace being your easy passive or your high maintenance 2-target cleave. Cleave cross dot is the proper terminology. I said cleave with air quotes. I'm a melee player, okay? I cleave. And how, you know, Writhe and Agony, Absolute Corruption, Death's Embrace, these tiers have very real competitions and build complements. Like Creeping Death is bad with Deathbolt because the fact that your dots last less time, and because we went over how Deathbolt snapshots, you're not going to have as much dot damage remaining when you cast the Deathbolt to make Creeping Death good. It'll be downtime, unless there's some mathematically breakpoint there, where if you have Absolute Corruption with Creeping Death, and you have Agony at 7 stacks, and you cast 2 UAs, and then you Deathbolt, it breaks even. Like, there'll be some huge Warlock Discord guide thing that the Lock One-Stop Shop will figure out, I'm sure. Otherwise, just a Haunt or Shadow Embrace, you know, those things will break down on how that all works. But obviously, Deathbolt benefits from Siphon Life more so than the other option. I want to touch on the Coming Soon talent real quick here, and then we'll move things around. The Coming Soon talent, we talked about this on stream. What if it's Shadow Flame? Or Soul Flame, sorry, not Shadow Flame. If it's Soul Flame, it would make sense in this talent tier, because I've already shown you what Nightfall does. And it might be a reworked version of your when stuff dies with corruption on it, it explodes. What's the actual verbiage here? When you kill a target, its soul bursts into flames, dealing spell power, Shadow Flame. That's why I called it Shadow Flame. Shadow Flame damage to all nearby enemies. So that is, of course, what Affliction Warlocks love right now when they sow the seeds on a bunch of stuff and it all goes and it all blows up in this huge volcanic shadow explosion of nonsense. That's obviously gone. But in this tier, you have Nightfall, which is a corruption synergy with a single target spell. And you have the new Grimoire of Sacrifice, which is heckin' boring. So you sacrifice your pet, you keep their Command Demon ability, so you will lose the Purge, you will lose the Slow, you will lose the Prayer of Fortitude, the Blood Pact from your Imp, but you keep the Singe Magic, you keep the Spell Lock, as you see here I have Spell Lock, and you will keep the Human Mez from the Succubus, right? You also keep... Actually, you know what? I don't even know. What do you keep from the Voidwalker? I guess you do keep the Shadow Bulwark. So the Shadowy Bulwark does give you the Last Stand. So that gives you another personal cooldown. People were talking on the stream today about how Affliction has lost a potential huge amount of sustain. But if that gives you more HP, you can couple that with Dark Pact, which sacrifices current HP to give you a large shield too. So there's a possibility there, depending on if you need cooldowns. I didn't actually test that on stream. That's an interesting one. You keep Shadow Bulwark from your Void Walker. So you sacrifice some of their utility to keep a bit of what they have. Okay, it goes back on cooldown too. Interesting. But they nerfed this or changed it. So Grimoire of Sacrifice is basically just an invisible dot that has a chance for all of your spells to sometimes deal additional shadow damage to the target. There's no AoE anymore. It does work on AoE abilities. So if you throw Seas of Corruption out there, you will possibly get the procs from, yeah, Demonic Power right here. Demonic power again from your corruptions hitting, the spread corruptions from your seeds. So demonic power is what it's called. It hits for single target. It does no animation, which they could bring back like the shadowy pwop that happens. But this is a single target spell that it's just like an extra dot. And it works on your AoE spells. Like if I pop a Phantom Singularity out here, you will see demonic power hits. So it has an AoE bonus, but it's just passive damage. That's all. That is quite literally it. But you just change the utility to yourself a little bit, and you get the passive damage. But most of the time, it's single target. And Nightfall is also a pretty single target. So what if this is Soulflame? That would be the AoE choice in this tier, like an actual AoE choice. Because Sacrifice has both the single-ish AoE target plus utility version, and this would just be pure AoE. So we'll see. We'll see how that works. The other major thing of note here, before I go into your one cooldown you can have, is Sow the Seeds. So Sow the Seeds currently on live is 2 additional targets. Sow the Seeds now is 1. Which may or may not be the nerf. There was a back and forth today about how Soul Flame was the reason why Sow the Seeds was strong. But if I recall, wasn't Sow the Seeds also nerfed in Legion from 3 to 2? Or from 4 to 2 or something like that? It was nerfed already once. So it was changed to 2. And remember, everyone's AoE and stuff is being downsized and minimized and simplified in battle, right? We're basically going back to Wrath, where X plus Y equals Z, not Legion, where X plus Y equals Z times A over B squared minus T, right? Well, that's how Legion is right now with Artifact plus the extra Artifact stuff, with another like Crucible, with Legendaries. And we might see some of that come back with Azeroth gear in the future, but right now we don't have that. So Sow the Seeds was cut down a little bit. Just a little bit. But I mean, honestly, it's still going to be huge. Because all the explosions chain off each other like you just saw there. So it still does the Sow the Seeds madness that can be just a ridiculous amount. And obviously absolute corruption to do more corruption damage after it spreads and to last forever on mobs that actually last long enough. Say, for example, a high mythic plus. Or large mobs like, say, Antoran High Command. Mobs like that, whereas Phantom Singularity is kind of like your single target and AoE ability. Kind of. Because Soul Harvest, which let me read Soul Harvest on live real quick. Let me also do another one of these damn tomes. Soul Harvest. Soul Harvest on live reads as follows. 2-minute cooldown that increases the damage, your damage and your pet's damage by 20% for 12 seconds, increased by 4 seconds for each target afflicted by your agony up to a maximum of 36. Relatively the same, 2-minute cooldown, you and your pet damage by 20%, but it only lasts for 4 seconds base. And then it increased by 6 seconds for each target afflicted by agony to a maximum of 36 seconds. So Soul Harvest, quite literally on a single target fight, will only give you 10 seconds of a cooldown. Whereas before, you get 12 plus the 1 agony you had. So you get what is that, 4 extra seconds? Yeah, you got 16 seconds. So you lost 6 seconds on a single target fight to have a 1 cooldown, a major cooldown. But as Affliction always tends to be this sort of AoE cross-dot, cross-cleave kind of ranged spec, Soul Harvest going to 36 seconds requires 6 agonies, which isn't going to happen on a lot of fights. A lot of fights are 1 target, or maybe 2 or 3. So there'll be a breakpoint there where Soul Harvest becomes good after a certain number of targets, because otherwise just casting Phantom Singularity on cooldown will mathematically do more damage. And that's a big point that was weird, because it's your only cooldown you can talent into, and it has a steeper requirement to make it really work. So you'll have to let me know in the comments down below or in the Warlock communities how you think the new Soul Harvest might play out. But again, coupling Deathbolt, Death's Embrace, Soul Harvest, Siphon Life in the execute window, even at only 10 seconds, could yield some pretty impressive bursty execute style numbers. You'd pop it at like, you know, 5% on a boss. So you could really see some compounding damage in that window. But the requirement for Soul Harvest, granted, again, Affliction has nothing else to worry about cooldown-wise. You have nothing. No Doomguard, no Infernal, no Reap Souls, nothing like that. If you play around the Soul Harvest window and can utilize it, that could probably be a huge benefit if that works. But overall, that is the Affliction Warlock. There isn't a whole lot to go over beyond that. There are just builds that work together. I personally think the Deathbolt playstyle is very fun to figure out and min-max and tool. Like, where is that window of time? Where is that sweet spot to go? The Haunt rotation with Creeping Death is just shotgun dots. Just going and going. Automatic shotgun dots, sorry, because usually shotguns only have 2 shells in them, right? So automatic shotgun, just keep going and going and going. Shadowy Embrace, skill cap ridiculously on 2 targets depending on like, haste values, breakpoints, the fight at hand. So that could be interesting. I also think that freeing up your different pets for Affliction, and of course Destro to be talked about soon, is super interesting, that many Warlocks either will love or hate. But that's all. Outside of the one coming soon talent, which you'll have to check out MMO Champion when we get new builds in the future to see how that works out and whatnot comes from there. But again, if you're new to the channel, of course, you can hit the subscribe button to keep up to date on all of the alpha and beta coverage to come. You can go back in time. We did a Warlock catch-up episode recently with 3 amazing Warlocks if you want to get caught up on Legion's current state of things. And of course, you can check out the Twitch channel to keep the stream going. There's a subscribe button over there, as well as other options and podcasts and things that are on the different ways to support the stream and keep me doing what I'm doing here. But again, check out the VOD if you want the entire almost 3 hours of testing. Or let me know in the comments down below what you think of the different Warlock stuff. Or if you have questions, some of the Warlock community, I know Gatto is going to be checking. If you have any questions, maybe he can answer them. He was already responding on the Demonology Warlock video before. But that is Affliction. Let me know what you think. I did leave a Scythe on for the transmog because, you know, just to... You're going to want to do that, right? Same thing happened with Demonologies. You have to use a one-hander and an offhand to transmog any Thalkiel. You're going to have to use, you know, staff to transmog. You're not going to be able to do one-hand, offhand with Affliction if you ever want any of your Ulthalesh skins from Legion. It's so weird. Whatever. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in the next Legion, currently alpha, testing videos.